Welcome to Storytelling with Eth-No-Tec. My name is Robert Kikuchi Ngoho.
My name is Nancy Wong, and
We are called Eth-No-Tec.
So today we have a very special program. My friend Robin Bady has done an amazing job of curating women who are willing to speak out, tell stories that might not feel comfortable to tell in other situations. So this is how it happened. Robin Bady, who's out in Brooklyn, New York, just got tired of all the issues that were happening and feeling helpless and powerless about it. And she felt she needed to do something about it. So she came up with this idea of curating women to tell their stories of racism, of rape, abortion, anything that was like needed to get out, needed to be told. And so in, I think, 2017 or 2016-17, she curated her very first No, We Won't Shut Up
Storytelling Festival.
Yeah. It was a concert in which she curated women who were willing to do that, storytellers. And she has done it every single time, every year, sometimes twice a year since. But in 2023, she was asked to do it for the Chennai Storytelling Festival in India. And so it was 8 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. So we offered for her to be able to do the recording of the 7 storytellers on our program, Storytelling with Eth-No-Tec. And that's what you're about to hear.
So here are the voices of women powerfully standing up, speaking out, and no, they will not shut up. Here are their stories.
I am a Southern belle. What? You don't believe me? Because I don't look like Scarlett O'Hara? Well, let me tell you, I am a Southern belle because I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1943. And as you can hear, I can quickly put on a Southern accent. And if you still don't believe me, I still remember my old home address. 4420 Fontainebleau Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana, USA. I am a Southern belle. You know, way back then, I had a best friend, Tommy Lou Fisher. She had a head full of flaming red hair. I remember being in the Mardi Gras with Tommy Lou, her big, huge feather. And me, all dressed up in a bird costume my mom made me. We would wave and reach out for the trinkets, shouting, "Hey, mister, gimme, mister," as the floats passed by. In the summer, Tommy Lou and I would put on our bathing suits to splash and play in the warm rain puddles after a warm southern downpour. I even remember, with Tommy Lou, mooning the cars going by as they drove along our street to the Sugar Bowl football game. We were probably all of 6 years old, bearing our tiny little butts. Not tiny anymore, though. I also remember at age 7 when Tommy Lou and I were playing in front of my house, and some boys on bicycles rode by and shouted, "Ching, ching, Chinaman, ah." Tommy Lou and I looked at each other. What's a Chinaman? Well, soon after that, I began noticing certain signs downtown, on the streetcars, at the train station, in the stores, on public bathroom doors, and water fountains that pointed an arrow one way for whites only and a different arrow going in the opposite direction for coloreds, meaning blacks. But I'm not white. I'm not black. I asked my mom where was I to sit, drink, go. Tommy Lou didn't have to choose where to sit, drink, or go. She didn't have to choose between white and coloreds. Weren't we alike? Weren't we both Southern belles? Flash forward to my young adulthood. While I was riding on a ski lift on a mountain in Tahoe, I heard voices calling out from somewhere below. I looked around and saw a group of young men who were workers at the ski resort and no doubt very cute. They were shouting something to me. I couldn't understand what they were saying, so smiling, I shouted back, "What?" They repeated it. I still didn't understand as my ski lift kept moving up the mountain slope further and further away from them. What kind of flirting was this? I shouted again, "What?" I was all smiles, eager for their flirty words. Finally, I heard them. "Hey, Chinese girl, do you have a slanted cunt?" I was stung. I was embarrassed. I felt shame. Did anyone else hear them say that about me? Each time something like that happened, instead of hating the racist, I hated myself. Because by then I had chosen to be white. Because in this country, even as a child, I noticed that whites got more respect, more privileges. That disrespect thrown at me was because I was not white. So to protect myself, to prevent disrespect, I knew I needed to be as white as possible. I heard it loud and clear. It just wasn't okay to not be white in America. I had become a banana, yellow on the outside and white on the inside. I was so thoroughly ingrained in this white self-image that when I was out and about, I was convinced I was white. I felt as white as my white friends and colleagues. Where I worked, where I lived, I dressed white. I spoke white. I thought white. Everywhere I looked, it was white. So thorough was my inversion that if I accidentally caught my own reflection in a store window, I was shocked to see that I wasn't white at all. How could I have fooled myself so thoroughly? That explained why it was too often treated as an object of curiosity, a cute little China doll, a sexual thing, exotic and pliable, because they saw what I refused to see. I was Chinese, not white. Out of pain, I went deeper and deeper. I began to turn my back on anything Chinese. Then, in the late 1960s, the Black is Beautiful movement arrived and inspired Asian Americans seized the moment and started the Asian American movement. Asian Americans also wanted to claim our own beauty, our own culture, as being just as valid as the white man's. I found my Asian self-worth. So in 1978, I ventured to China to deepen my newly found roots. While I was on a bus in Shanghai with my dad's family, the wife of one of my uncles was whispering to her husband and staring at me. Turns out she wanted to know why, if I was the American relative, why didn't I have blonde hair and blue eyes? Even abroad, America sold the idea that only white Americans were the real Americans. They are the stars, the heroes in our movies, the models in magazines, in advertising. No wonder I too bought that to be considered a real American, I had to be white. Denying my own ethnicity as a positive, desirable quality is only because America denies it too. Well, no more. I was not going to be the other white. The Asian American movement helped me declare my visibility, not just to others, but most importantly, to myself. That felt like a homecoming. Now I wanted to know more. I began to do some research. And what I found shocked me to the core. I found our history in this country. Since the day we came to this country for gold mining in 1848, Chinese have been lynched, robbed, beaten, and murdered. Our villages burned down, whole Chinese communities driven out and put on a barge or train to who knows where. And all sanctioned and participated in by politicians, sheriffs, government officials, editors of newspapers. Our governments passed laws against just us. I was shocked to learn that the miners' tax in California was applied only to Chinese miners. And we weren't allowed to testify in court against a white person. My family on my mother's side started the fishing industry in the Monterey Bay Area in 1850. I learned that one of the laws that eventually passed was Chinese not allowed to fish during the day. Chinese women who were immigrating here had to first prove they were not prostitutes. And of course, there was the only ever immigration law passed against one ethnic group, the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. That lasted for 61 years. The Chinese were not allowed to vote, own property, even if born in the United States, or allowed to become naturalized citizens for almost 100 years after we arrived. That's at least 4 generations of being Chinese Americans. Then I read how a Chinese person born an American but married to a Chinese non-citizen would have her own American citizenship stripped from her. My mom was a 4th generation American and married my dad from Shanghai. That meant she wouldn't be able to get a US passport. That meant she had no country. And now, thanks to the hateful rhetoric coming from our ex-president, Mr. Trump, and his MAGA followers, we have been made victims of racist hate again. It angers me and scares me when I hear about the brutal violence against our elders and women, knifings and slashings, acid in faces, pushed down onto hard cement sidewalks, onto subway rails, box cutters slashing the faces of our children, all unprovoked by cowards. We can no longer afford to be silent and invisible. We are making our voices heard. We've been waiting for this moment since 1848 to be heard and seen in a powerful way with empathic allies like you listening to us, listening now to my story. We have built this nation and its economy. We Chinese have contributed as artists, social workers, teachers, lawyers, scientists, librarians, administrators, laborers, restaurant workers, the military. But what I know is that we can march, we can protest, we can pass laws, we can be awarded federal monies to fight racism, we can educate. But nothing will change if the white man in America or any group that oppresses another group does not change. I want to ask those groups, why do you fear us? Why do you hate us? We do not want to take anything from you. We do not want to replace you. We just want to live our lives with possibility. There's enough for everyone. Diversity benefits all of us. Cultural differences enrich all our lives. Skin color is just the result of the amount of pigment in our skin. It is not anything but nature's love of diversity. I am a Southern belle because just like Tommy Lou's white face, this is an American face. You cannot shut us up or shut us down. No matter what you do to us, we will continue celebrating who we are. All the Southern Belle asks is for all of us to please heal the wounds of your hearts so we can all thrive and live in peace. with each other.
It was a Friday morning in late November. I was in my second hour algebra class when we heard the loudspeaker in the ceiling crackle, and the vice principal's voice came out saying, "Students, teachers, we were expecting an announcement about a pep rally that night and the football game later on that evening. Instead," he said, "we've just received word that President Kennedy has been shot. The president has been shot and he is dead. School is dismissed for the day. Extracurricular activities are suspended until further notice. Please take your regular scheduled buses home." Well, I sat there on the bus home that day, looking out the window, looking down at my hands, wondering what I was supposed to think about all this. All around me, my classmates, some of them were crying, even the boys, as if they had lost a friend, or as if this was affecting them deeply. I thought, well, I know a terrible thing has happened, but it's not like I knew President Kennedy. It's not like his death is really going to affect my life. And then I thought, it was really strange. I realized that I went to school with all these kids whose moms and dads had more than likely voted for John Kennedy. My parents hated Kennedy. They were Nixon supporters all the way. I remember that election. I was 10 years old in 1960, that presidential election, and my parents took me with them. We would go canvassing, knocking on doors. I heard them late in the night making phone calls. We had the bumper stickers, we had the yarn signs, and that election was so close. My mom and dad held out hope till the last vote was counted. But in the end, it was the rich guy from Harvard who talked funny, who went to the White House, not their man, Richard Nixon. Now, like Nixon, my mom and dad had been raised in very modest circumstances during the Depression in Oklahoma, where the Jim Crow laws were observed and strictly enforced. And this separate but equal approach to race relations worked just fine as far as they were concerned. And then here comes this John Fitzgerald Kennedy, this East Coast intellectual, bringing his federal government in to integrate Southern schools, Southern buses, Southern affairs that were just none of his business. My parents would say, what do these people want anyway? I mean, by the time I was in high school, we had seen marches, sit-ins, riots, all happening in the United States. Of course, we didn't experience them firsthand because we lived in a good suburb. We saw it on the evening news, but still, my mom and dad just kept saying, this country is going to hell in a handbasket. It's that Martin Luther King. He's whipping them all into a frenzy. You know, if he just went back where he came from, they'd go back where they came from and remember who they are. Somebody needs to shut him up. And in April 1968, somebody did shut him up permanently. I still remember our next door neighbor came over jubilant with the news. She said, haven't I said this is what he's been asking for? Huh? Haven't I said he's going to get it? Yes. My mom My mom said, well, I think it's a shame things have come to this extreme. Oh, he's not going to be making speeches anymore, true, but now the man's a martyr. Over the evening news that night, my dad said, this is what you get, Megan. This is what you get. You stand up, you rock the boat, you draw attention to yourself. Martin Luther King got what he was asking for. I hope you understand that. I didn't understand anything. At the time Dr. King was murdered, 1968, I was in my first year in college, a freshman in college, a very sheltered freshman, living at home in a household where all the answers for life's questions had been determined long before I was born. And in my college classes, there didn't seem to be any answers, only more questions. At home, an argument, a disagreement meant an argument, and it meant that somebody left the conversation angry. In our classes in college, we were encouraged to disagree, encouraged to argue, encouraged to sometimes even change our minds. I just wanted somebody to tell me what I needed to know and study in order to get an A in my final. I thought, I can't think about this now. I've got too much other stuff going on. I'm not going to think about it. And I didn't until June of that year, when Robert Kennedy was assassinated. He had just won the California Democratic primary for president. And on his way out of the convention center, he was shot and killed. I heard about it on the radio on my way to my sociology class the next morning. Now, I knew what my mom and dad thought about Robert Kennedy. They really didn't like him. He was even more radical in their minds than his brother John. And it looked as though he was on his way to the White House too, until that bullet took him out. Well, I frankly didn't know what I thought about Robert Kennedy, not at the time. But in that moment, alone in the car, when there was nobody around me cueing me what I should be thinking, how I should be feeling, in that moment, I realized, wait a minute, my mom and dad are wrong. It is obscene to think that standing up and speaking your truth, whether I agree with you or totally disagree with you, you speaking what's on your heart is no reason for you to get shot and killed. The radio announcer said that the day had been declared a national day of mourning, and that people who wanted to honor the life and work of Robert Kennedy were encouraged to drive with their headlights on. Well, I still remember what it felt like. I remember that moment viscerally. I sat up a little taller in the driver's seat. I reached out my hand. I could still feel that knob as I pulled it out from the dashboard, turning my high beams on, and I drove with my high beams on that day. It was my first political statement, and it was a tiny one, but it was my own.
Does it hurt? What? It. Like, does it hurt like the first time? I was 8 years old, and I just asked my mom about losing my virginity. Being the love child, free love, hippie mom that she was, she didn't get upset. She just said, well, not if you love the guy. If you like him and he likes you, it shouldn't hurt. In fact, it should feel pretty good. Okay, my mom shared a lot of information with me over the years about exactly how good sex should feel, to the point where I just stopped asking and then eventually stopped listening. But that one tip stuck with me, that the idea that if you liked him and he liked you, then it should feel good. So much so that I kind of made that my only rule, in finding the guy that I was going to give it up to. Which, when I was a kid, I didn't think was going to be that hard, finding someone who cared about me. But at 23 years old, I was still a virgin, living in New York City, looking for that one guy. Well, I was working in the film industry, and I had just finished working on this one movie that had only been in town for a week. So I'd only worked on it for a week, and yet they still gave us, the crew, a wrap party. Of course I went, even though I didn't know anyone that well, because, a wrap party means free alcohol, and I was 23 years old. So it was about midnight, and I had one or two or four too many, but still, when Jim, this production assistant, came up to me and handed me a drink, I still took it. I mean, free alcohol, and Jim he had a nice smile. He was good to look at. I didn't know him very well, but what the heck. So he tossed back his shot, and I tossed back mine, and almost as soon as the glasses were back on the bar, Jim pulled me out onto the dance floor, and he started spinning me around. And I mean, I danced a lot, but I danced drunk a lot, but this felt weird. I started getting dizzy right away. The room started getting really blurry. I felt like I was gonna pass out or something, and I guess Jim noticed, because he pulled me out of the bar fast. Like, I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to anyone. And then he pulled me into a cab. And I have to admit that the rest of that night remains blurry. It's almost like scenes that come into focus, and in between there's just blackness. We're in the back of the cab, and I look outside, and I notice we're heading uptown. And I turn to Jim and I say, Jim, I live in Brooklyn. He puts his hand on my knee and he says, it's okay. It's okay. Jim has opened up the door to his apartment. He puts his hand on my lower back and he guides me through his dark living room into his bedroom and closes the door behind us. I'm naked in Jim's bed. It's a twin size bed. It's not really big enough for the two of us, but he's not beside me. He's on top of me, his face inches away from mine. He looks into my eyes and says, ready? I can't think. I don't know what to say, so I don't say anything. And then he's inside me. And it hurts. I'm in Jim's tiny New York City apartment bathroom, and I have my dress on, and I pull down my underwear to sit on the toilet, and when I do, blood streaks down my thigh, and I look at it, and I don't understand at first. And then I realize I'm not a virgin anymore. I take the subway back to my apartment in Brooklyn, and I get there before the sun is up, and I lock myself in my bedroom, and I just cry for the entire weekend. I cry and I try to understand what happened. I keep trying to piece together everything that had happened to try to lead me to understanding why I let this happen, why I saved myself for 23 years just to give it up to some guy that I hardly know. And I keep thinking about that moment when he asked me and I didn't say anything. I should have said no. I should have yelled no. But I didn't. So he didn't know. So it was my fault. And by the end of the weekend, I still don't understand, and I feel so terrible that I call my mom and I say, Mommy, I didn't want to. It hurt. And she says, oh, honey, I love you. You're gonna be okay. This happens. Just try to put it behind you. Try to move on. You'll be better the next time. It'll be better the next time. Just try to forget about it. And I do. I try to put it behind me, but I carry this shame with me, this confusion with me, this guilt with me. And the next time is with the guy who cares about me. But as soon as he's inside me, I can't help it. I just start crying hysterically, and he pulls away and he says, Jess, did I hurt you? I'm so sorry. What did I do? I didn't mean to hurt you. And I can't tell him because I don't understand that he's not the one who hurt me. But it gets better. Over the next 10 years, I don't let go of the shame. I don't let go of the feeling of wrongness, but it gets better. And then about 10 years after, I was single. I was living in Virginia in an apartment. I was home one night just watching a stupid movie with some action star as the hero. And his daughter, his teenage daughter, goes out to a bar. And this guy that she doesn't know hands her a drink. And she's a teenager. She takes it and she drinks it. And then the room starts to go blurry. And the guy pulls her out of the bar and he pulls her into a car and he takes her back to his apartment and he pushes her on the bed and then he is on top of her. And I was on my living room floor crying because what happened to her was what happened to me. And the movie was very clear about what happened to her. And that was the first time that I realized that I'd been raped. And I'd like to say that it just got better after that. And I was like, oh, good, I resolved that issue. But it took a while. I still had to work it out. But my mom had already passed away by then. And so I called my sister and I talked to her about it. And I said, I just really wish I had understood it better when it had happened. And my sister said, well, Mom was raped too. And no, I didn't know that. She'd never told me. She told me so many inappropriate things about her sex life, but she had never told me that she'd been raped. And I really wish she had. But things did get better after that, and it's been more than 10 years, and now I have two beautiful kids. We're not quite old enough yet. One of them is 8, but I don't want to have the talk with her yet. But I will have the talk because I think it's important, and I will share what my mom told me. I will tell them that if you care about the other person, if the other person cares about you, it does make it better, and it should never hurt, and it should feel good. That's great advice. But I will also tell them about the risks, about double standards, about watching your back and watching your drink. And I will tell them my rape story and hope that it's enough to keep them safe. But if either of them ever comes to me and says, I didn't want to, I tried to say no, it hurt, then I will tell them, I love you. You're going to be okay. And this was not your fault.
Cùng kim kim cùng ta ta ca cùng kim kim cùng ta ta cùng kim kim ta ca cùng kim kim cùng ta ca.
Hello. I came of age in the last century and naively thought TV commercials were reality. One of my favorite commercials showed women swimming and riding horses on the beach, smiling happily because they used tampons. I couldn't wait to have that kind of fun. When I told Mom I was bleeding, she said, now that you have your period, be careful because you'll be a woman soon. She gave me a sanitary belt, a box of Kotex pads, and that was it. Fun fact, the original sanitary pads were made from wood pulp. Oddly enough, any pad I ever wore had the comfort factor of wood. The sanitary belt, you ask? Picture on your naked hips an elastic slingshot rigging with metal loops front and back through which the extended ends of the pad are secured to the belt. I use the term secured loosely because throughout the day, the belt loosens and the pad shifts like a wood pulp canoe, anxious to spring a leak. After 1 year of bulky pads, I thought it's time I had fun like the smiling women in the tampon commercials. Embarrassed beyond description, I bought a box of tampons. Nervous and shaking, I finally got one inserted. It felt very uncomfortable, but I went outside anyway and sat on my Brooklyn stoop to wait for the fun to begin. How could those women smile riding horses? I couldn't even sit on the stoop. I didn't know to first remove the cardboard. In spite of new plastic glide and slide designs, tampons never really felt comfortable for me. No frolicking, sun-kissed fun periods for me. No wonder it's called the curse. My first day, a Catholic high school freshman, I had a Kotex pad and rosary beads in my book bag. I sang folk songs to guitar at mass, sons of God, hear his holy name. And I had a new school uniform with the waistband rolled up so my knees would show. And I had subjects, including Latin, taught by a cadre of stone-faced nuns. My religious indoctrination, now reinforced by a demerit-based code of behavior, made me the model student. But outside school, I was a rebel. I joined the company of free thinkers and liberals, which at the time was not a dirty word. I worked tirelessly for racial harmony in groups like the Panel of Americans and the Encampment for Citizenship. By sophomore year, I was the director of the youth drama group of Brooklyn's National Conference of Christians and Jews. That's where I met Phil, my first love. I was the Christian and he was the Jew. When one of my actors failed to show, I pointed to the first guy I saw. Come here, I need you to read this. Phil started coming to our rehearsals. I liked his confidence. He liked my legs. After drama group rehearsals, he'd walk me to my bus stop. I didn't realize we were a thing until one day after rehearsal, he offered to buy me a hot dog. I demurred. I can't eat meat on Friday. We agreed to have hot dogs another day. My father had abandoned me in utero. I wasn't pretty and thought no guy would ever like me. And now I have a boyfriend? Gentle reminder that if I didn't know what to do with the tampon, I definitely didn't know what to do with a boyfriend. Sex ed wasn't taught at my all-girls Catholic school. I didn't even know what sex actually was, but religion class taught that it was for married couples only. The lesson was, don't talk about sex, don't have sex, don't use birth control, and don't even think about sex. Unmarried, it's all a mortal sin. Holding hands in a chaste kiss was my idea of romance. Phil, 2 years older, had other ideas. My misconceptions about sex, like you had to be in bed and have lots of candles around, well, that left plenty of room for error. Phil and I were going steady. I said, no, I can't. It's against my religion, month after month. And yet he persisted. One night we stood kissing goodbye in my hallway. John Coltrane wailed on my portable record player. Suddenly, Phil started moving rapidly against me. Is he having an epileptic attack? He whispered, just the tip. Coltrane soared as Phil pressed me against the wall. When he left with a grin, I thought, did we go past first base? In the bathroom, on my panties, I saw a tiny spot of blood. What had happened? I was scared and in a weird way proud that I might be a woman now. If you're of a certain age in my culture, you know the power of dreams. Mom said she dreamed of fish. I laughed at her. Old-fashioned superstitions. Well, play the number for fish, Mom. She asked, are you a slut? No, I yelled a little too loud. I didn't know exactly what a slut was, but I might be a woman now. Not really. I was a Catholic high school junior in denial. I was a cheerleader for Christ. Jesus, Jesus, he's our man. If he can't save us, no one can. I was a team leader on borough-wide religious retreats. This time I prayed in chapel all night. God, please send my period. The second month, Mom dreamed of fish, the symbol of pregnancy. She ignored my denials and took me to the doctor. I got my first encounter with a speculum, and a box of black pills the size of jawbreakers. 3 a day for 3 days should bring on my period. The 5th day, it got real. Mom said, make a decision. Baby out of wedlock or throw yourself down the staircase. Oh boy, decisions, decisions. How did I want to go to hell? Phil was a freshman at the University of Wisconsin. We had late night long distance phone calls fraught with teenage angst. Finally, the adults took over. Phil flew in to be with me. And of course, he asked for sex because I was already pregnant. Men, ugh. No weekend trip to Puerto Rico or London for me. $500 from Phil's father would cover an abortion in New York. His uncle gave us a number of a safe doctor to call. We talked in code because then in the previous century, both me and the doctor were subject to arrest. Oh, the more things change, what do you know? Relentless period math and the thought of cells scraped and sucked out of me wasn't horror enough. Before me loomed jail and an eternity in hell. Be alone? Get picked up in front of a cathedral? Well, I'll be wearing my plaid high school uniform. I handed the burly driver my envelope. He counted the money and let me into the limo where 3 white girls wearing blindfolds made room for me. My blindfold in place, my heart in my mouth and my soul firmly in hell, We drove to the basement of a medical facility where a nurse took off my blindfold and handed me a hospital gown. I was scared, but grateful I wasn't in a back alley room staring at a hanger or knitting needle. During the anesthetic, the doctor asked, "What douche did you use?" What a question from a stranger. I heard a vacuum sound and said, "Jean-Naté." I had 2 years of French and a pretty good accent. The doctor said, "That sounds exotic." I woke up with my feet elevated against the wall. Someone had put on me my sanitary belt and a napkin. I felt groggy, empty, and relieved. I was told to dress. Several of us were led back to the limo and our blindfolds. I left the limo at the church steps in Washington Heights. Across the street at a tiny Spanish restaurant, Mom sat waiting for me. I felt weird and hungry. After per meal with rice and beans, we went home to Brooklyn on the subway. Phil spent the weekend with me and Mom. It was awkward, but the worst was over. He went back to Wisconsin with blue balls. I went back to high school with a mortal sin. I didn't want to lead religious retreats anymore. I asked my high school chaplain that if he knew someone had done something she'd be excommunicated for, would he tell the Pope? He just silently smiled. Years later, when I was told he'd left the priesthood to marry, I remembered his gentle eyes. Thank you.
The year was 2011. And we were going to take our kids to LA, a West Coast trip. Before I had kids, I had taken teenagers on tours throughout the West Coast, and it was finally my time to take my own teenagers. I was so excited that I had decided I would not need my mothering hat. I could untie that invisible string that held that hat on. I even dared to put it into the hat box in my closet, and we boarded the plane. Oh my God, it was great. We took them to the Hollywood Bowl to see Fantasia. We took them along the Walk of Fame to see all those handprints and footprints. We even took them to a taping, Conan O'Brien. I even let my youngest daughter, 14, use a fake ID so we could pass her off as 16. And my husband had snagged some tickets for the LA Lakers, but just for the eldest and the youngest and himself. Well, that meant that I had my daughter, 17 years of age. I needed to think of something cool to do, and I knew that Melrose Avenue was the spot. So she and I went to all the little cool shops on Melrose. We even went out for a little dinner, and we both let our hair down because, let's just say, the teen years, mom and daughter, had not been so pleasant. But we had a good evening. The next day, we were planning to go to the beach. We were going to meet my cousin Heidi, who now lived in San Diego. They drove north, we drove south, and we parked at the exact same moment. Well, when we got out of the car, we just had ourselves, our own things, bathing suits, sun hat, sunscreen, and even the towels that I snagged from the pool, from the hotel pool. But Heidi, when she opened up that trunk, well, let's just say she pulled out this great big huge stroller, and it wasn't the kind that the little kids use. Oh no, and she put on there the cooler, the chairs, the blankets, the towels. I think she even had the kitchen sink. We paid the parking, and we followed Heidi across the street. Now, Heidi had picked out this small little grassy knoll. It was just before the boardwalk. And what framed it to make it private was this hedge that was shaped in the form of an L. And that's where she placed her chairs, right up against the hedge that on the other side was the boardwalk. Well, she put out the blanket with all the food, and we opened up our blankets, our towels, and we sat on them looking straight up at Heidi and Sheldon and her kids sitting on their chairs. And my kids sat on the empty coolers, and we got reacquainted. My kids hadn't seen her kids since they were in elementary school or even younger. Oh, the afternoon passed beautifully. Food was delicious. And in a little while, the two older boys, 17 and 18, they said they were going to go off to see the ocean, go into the water. That was fine. And then the younger girls, the two for each family, they said that they were going to go. And I had no problem with that. I didn't have to go and supervise because Heidi's kids, they grew up on the ocean. And these girls were 12, 14, no problem. So it was the 17-year-old, Chelsea. She stayed with us, but she just put out her blanket and said she was going to chillax. And she was going to soak in the rays because soon they were going back to school. So that meant Heidi and I could just reminisce, catch up on old times, talk about our kids, talk about everything. We got on the topic of Bubby, our grandmother. She made the best moon cookies. They were round, they were flat, full of poppy seed. And if you got to Bubby's house on after baking day, well, you could actually snag yourself a bag of the burnt ones. Our grandmother kept them underneath the sink for just that purpose. And they were the best. And as we laughed and talked and just caught up, well, I'm looking at Heidi from sitting down on my towel, and I'm looking at her with different eyes. I see her as having a lot of our grandmother in her. She's got that laugh, that jovialness. She's round, she's short, she's even well endowed like my grandmother was. The afternoon is just delicious. A little while later, the boys return, but they stand on the boardwalk and they talk over the bush. And that means that Heidi just has to turn her ear so that she could hear what they have to say. But from where I am sitting, I can see everything. It doesn't take long for a man to walk up, right beside the boys, stands next to them. And this man, he is a tall, stately man, and those boys are tall. And for a moment, I get the impression that maybe he's asking them directions or a question. He's wearing a white button-down shirt, short sleeve. He's got this leather strap that just goes underneath his collar. And then I hear them talking about the ocean, the tide, the weather, the temperature, all manner of things like that. But then I hear a sound. It's ever so faint, click. And I think to myself, no, that's not the sound of flip-flops hitting the pavement, of the people passing behind where Adam and Ryan, this man, are standing on the boardwalk. And then I hear it again, click, click. And I think, no, that's not the sound of the volleyball hitting the sand. And it's certainly not the sound of the hands that hit that ball back over the net, because I can hear that sound. The volleyballers are not so far from us. And no sooner do I hear it again, I am standing on my feet. My antennae that are invisible, they've shot right up. My radar is at full alert. I look for my daughter to my left and I do not see her, and my heart skips a beat. I don't know where she is, but I walk around the side of that hedge, and there she is. She's laying out on her towel. She's exposed her body, but she's wearing her bikini. She's got her sunscreen on. She's soaking in the rays. And as I look at her and her cute little figure, I think she's starting to fill out in the places where she had lost body mass due to bulimia and anorexia. But no sooner do I hear that click sound again, my eyes are now looking right at the hedge. They're looking at my son and his cousin and the man. And I start to scream all manner of words, all sorts of accusations. I am a lunatic. And my son says, whoa, Mom, slow down. Hang on. I can't catch what you're trying to tell me. Slow. That man, he's taking pictures of your sister. There's pictures of her on his camera. The man starts to shake. He's got to be in his mid to late 70s, maybe even early 80s. I'm not quite sure. But he says, oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe I took one. I'll delete it. And he does delete it. He places it in the trash. But my son sees that unless he empties it from his trash, that digital imprint will still be there. And I am now screaming all manner of predator, pedophile, shame on you. What are you doing? How dare you violate my daughter? My son has grabbed the camera from around the man's neck. The strap is still attached to the man. And Ryan rifles through those pictures and says, Mom, you're right. There's more than one. There's many pictures of Chelsea. I'll delete them. I will put them in the trash. I will empty the trash. All the while I'm just screaming, I'm yelling, I'm calling this man all sorts of names. And then a woman starts to walk by. She's wearing blue trousers, a white button-down shirt. She's carrying a red purse across her shoulder. She's got black hair like me. She pulls it back in a ponytail. And she asks, oh, why are you shouting at this poor nice man? He's such a dear. I look at her. Are you kidding me? This man's a predator. He's violated my daughter. He's taking pictures. Nonsense. He's taking pictures of the scenery. I look at her. I go, who are you? Are you his caregiver? Are you his daughter? Shame on you. And again, when she says he's just taking pictures of scenery, I look over my shoulder. There's no scenery. That's where we parked our cars. I now look at her again and I scream, are you his accomplice? Are you taking him out and you're the cover and you're letting him take pictures? What do you do with these pictures? Do you put them on the internet? What does he do with these pictures? And I can tell you all things are flashing through my mind, but I'll spare you what I was thinking. My son now says, Mom, I've emptied the trash. There are no more pictures on his camera. And he lets that camera swing back. And I watch as it lands just below the man's chest. And this woman walks up to him. She says, oh, there, you poor thing. I'm so sorry. I will take you. We'll go walking away from these unpleasant people. Again, I start to scream and yell, police, help, someone. These people should be put in jail for violating young girls on a beach. But who's going to pay attention to me? I'm in the US of A. I'm Canadian. By the time these people leave, they'll probably just look at me as another crazy woman. My daughter is standing beside me now. She is fully clothed, and she's even done her button right up to the nape of her neck. She throws her arms around me. She says, oh, Mama, thank you. You were a barracuda, a lioness. I say, of course. You're my daughter. That man violated you. You have nothing to feel shameful for. We hug. I hold her for quite some time. As I do, I look over towards my son and I pick up my hand and I just blow him a kiss. He knows I'm full of gratitude for him being there because otherwise her picture would be on that man's camera. We walk back to the group. My husband, Sheldon, Heidi, they're all just sitting there. Heidi's ear is still turned up towards the boys over the hedge. And they say, what was that all about? I look at them. I can't believe it. They want to know why I was screaming and yelling. They have no idea what just happened. So I fill them in. And we try to let it go. It's hard. It's really hard. And I'm holding my daughter beside me. We wait for the little girls to come back as they do. And after a while, we just pack up. We try to pick up the pieces. And when we are all packed up, we put the things in the car, and it's decided that we're not going to end the day on this sour note. We go into Laguna and we walk around, we eat. We even have some ice cream just to sweeten and end on a sweet note. And it helps, it does. But I'll tell you something, whether my mothering hat is on or it isn't, I have antenna and all of you do too. And it's important that we call out the wrongs, no matter where we are in the world.
I am exhausted. I have been floating in the river for hours. It takes me farther and farther away. Finally, I give up and I start sinking. And I reach the bottom of the river and hey, there are plants. Hay plantas ahí abajo. So I start pulling myself, grabbing onto these plants, and I manage to arrive to the bank of the river. I manage to pull myself out of the water. I collapse on the sand. The sand is dry, is warm. It is dark around me. I feel good. But suddenly, there is the sound of a woman's voice. And she cries out, "Ay, mis hijas, ¿qué será de ustedes?" I look up. And then there's another voice, and another voice. "Oh, my daughters, what will become of you?" No, it's not La Llorona. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 women with black shawls on their head, yelling out to the sky. And they each have a big basket. And they pull food out of the basket, a piece of bread, a tamal, fruit, and they offer it to the sky. And suddenly, through that sky, come piercing cries of young women. And they fly from one side to the other. They are wearing torn white dresses and they have bright bloodshot eyes. And they yell as they fly, and I understand they are the Cihuateteos, the spirit women, women that have died before their time, angry women, and they fly. And the shawl women, they take the food and offer it. And yes, the Cihuateteos come down and gobble the food. And then the women offer them drink, water, milk, even a beer. And again, the Cihuateteos drool the liquid. The shawl women take off the scarf from their head and try to catch the Cihuateteos, the women dead before their time, and put them in the basket. The mothers want to take them where they should be. They should be in their house, in their home, with their father, maybe with the boyfriend, or with their sons. But the Cihuateteos refuse to stay in the basket. They get out and fly again, shrieking, "Ee!" And the mothers chase them, "Ay, mis hijas," and the shrieking, it is too much for me. I cover my ears and bury my face in the sand. Several hours later, I feel it on the skin of my arms, the warmth of the sun. I look up, and yes, the sun is rising. I stand, I shake the sand off of me, and I start walking towards that beautiful, beautiful ball of light. And I realize I am in the desert, and the sky is pink and orange and yellow, and I walk. But suddenly, I see something very strange, really bizarre. In the middle of the desert, there are these huge crosses, pink, bright pink crosses. And right next to the crosses are the women with the shawls, but they are relaxed. They're sitting down, chatting with some children, a few men are there. And I am hungry, so I go towards him to ask for food. But suddenly, something stops me. There is a sound. I realize they are praying together. Mother, thou who art in heaven and hell, in the brothels, in the streets, in the jailhouse. Mother, listen to my words. They tear our nipples off with their mouths. They burn our bodies with gasoline. They change our clothes from one corpse to another to confuse our families. They bury our bones under the sands of Ciudad Juarez, Mother. Please listen to me, Mother. They do not act alone. They have accomplices. They have accomplices, and we do know who they are, Mother. Please, don't cover them with your cloak. Don't help those who murder us, who rape us, who cut us into pieces, Mother. May my blood and the blood of my sisters feed the earth, so those who live will have the strength. Mother, keep them away from silence, from indifference, from obedience, Mother. Let them be angry and never fall in the hands of despair. Mother, keep me away from silence, from indifference, from fear. Let me be angry and never fall in the hands of despair. In my country, Mexico, 8 women every day are disappeared and never show up again. This has been going on for many years. Just last year, 2022, 3,200 women vanished. 99% of these cases are not even investigated. The mothers, the sisters of these women go out looking for their bodies, and they find them in the sands of the desert, in the forests, on the beaches. But now, those mothers and those sisters are being murdered, are being disappeared also. In the streets of the big cities, the women march. They wear black, they cover their faces, they break windows, they paint the walls, they light fires, because this is the only way that they have found to be heard. And now, in the air of those cities, you can hear this song. A cada minuto de cada semana nos roban amigas, nos matan hermanas, destrozan sus cuerpos, las desaparecen, no olvide su nombre. Oiga usted, presidente, cantamos sin miedo, pedimos justicia, gritamos por cada desaparecida, que retumbe fuerte, nos queremos vivas, que caiga con fuerza el feminicida. The words say, every moment of every week, they take one of our sisters away. They murder one of us, one of our friends. They destroy their bodies. They disappear those women. Hey, Mr. President, don't forget these women have a name. We sing without fear. We demand justice. We cry out for each disappeared woman. And our voices say, we want to be alive. And may the murderer fall. Soy Claudia, soy Esther y soy Teresa. Soy Ingrid, soy Fabiola y soy Jimena. Soy la niña que subiste a la fuerza. Soy la madre que ahora llora por sus muertas. Y soy esa que te hará pagar la cuenta. Y retiembla en sus centros la tierra al sonoro rugir del cañón. I am Claudia, I am Ingrid, I am Therese, I am Jimena, I am Esther, I am Yolanda. I am that little girl that you pulled into your car. I am the mother that cries for her dead one. I am she who will make you pay for your crimes. And may the center of the earth tremble as we cry out, as sisters, as we shout our love song.
it was 2007, and against everyone's advice, and I mean everyone, I was on a plane to spend the month of December in the homophobic and cultural wasteland that is Northern Florida. I was going to help my mom and help her with my very ill stepfather who she was trying to get him on hospice. And when I say everyone was against this, that's not hyperbole. My friends, my therapists, I think I had 2 therapists at the time, my exes. I'm sure if my ex's therapist could have weighed in, they also would have said it was a bad idea. They thought it was a plan of action that could go really badly. Okay, so I had come out to my mom as queer maybe 6 years previous, and I did it via the United States Postal Service. I had selected a card that I gotten at a 10-pack at the dollar store. It was not quite card stock, almost card stock, and it said, "Thinking of you" in blue large script on the outside. I mean, now there's an entire rainbow division of Hallmark, and you can, get a "guess what, I'm a pansexual" card, but it was the 90s, and that's what we had. At the time I'd been dating somebody, and it was just becoming too much of a pain in the butt to cover it up, right? So I used that card, and maybe I took that card a little literally. I was actually thinking of my mom. And what I had been thinking was, okay, so up to now, one of us in a conversation, if one of us has to be uncomfortable, it's been me. And now it's your turn. I came from an enthusiastically evangelical background, much like Rhonda with the cheer. My mom was one of those, "We love Jesus. Yes, we do. We love Jesus. How about you?" So I didn't think she was going to join like the Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays and be cheering on the nearest pride parade, but still her reaction surprised me. 2 weeks after I sent the card, I got this large envelope in the mail, and it wasn't even enough for even a dollar store card. I opened it up and all these little tiny pieces of paper came floating out. And when I picked them up, it was my birth certificate, and that she had ripped up and sent to me. To convey her subtle displeasure at me coming out, she ripped up my birth certificate and sent it to me. And the problem with that is, well, you all know what the problem with that is, right? But there's a couple problems, more than one. First of all, for someone who wanted to do nothing to do with gayness, that was a little dramatic, don't you think? I mean, that almost seems like something a drag queen would do on stage. Rip, rip, rip. Also, it was like my certified copy of my birth certificate. And I had to go to the county clerk's office to get it replaced, who looked at the pieces, looked at me and said, "Oh, we get a lot of this from people who look like you," which means my mom was not being as original as she thought she was. At some point I complained to my therapist about it. I was like, "Oh, that was so passive aggressive." And she said, "No, that was aggressive. Anyway, by 2007, it had been, I don't know, 8 or 9 years since that birth certificate incident. It had been her dramatic response, but it wasn't her final answer. And my mom and I had continued to see each other on holidays and talked every so often on the phone. And I don't know, she watched a lot of Ellen on television, or maybe she talked to her hairdresser, and our relationship, it grew back together. Although one of my friends said, "Yeah, you're like exchanging cards at Christmas, have a relationship with your mom, not take care of her jerk husband better." All right, so my mom has been married to a series of jerky alcoholics, which they both mostly seem largely interchangeable to me. My sister said that my mom would stand outside of a rehab with like a meatloaf in her trench coat. Come on now, you don't need 90 days. But this particular stepdad was a retired Army colonel, and he had been in civilian life for almost 2 decades, yet everyone still called him Colonel, except my mom, when she called him by her affectionate nickname for him, which was TC, which stands for, the Colonel. I asked her if we could call her TM for the mom, but she didn't think that was funny at all. And he was old and sick and even dying. And my friend said, "Well, I hope you don't feel obligated to go down and help them." And I didn't feel obligated. I'm the youngest of 5, I have a bunch of siblings all older than me, and they are all very helpy pants. If I'm needed, I'm dispatched, but I didn't have to. But in 2005, my partner had a recurrence of the ovarian cancer that she'd been battling on and off for a number of years. And she died in 2007, earlier that same year. My last Christmas had been spent securing hospice case for her. And we had an amazing group of friends around us, and they helped with grocery shopping and meals and, doing medication errands. We had a tremendous amount of support, so much more than my mom had. And still, I kept thinking of these December nights when Heather, my partner, would wake me up in a pain crisis or with unremitting nausea, or one night when she woke me up from a sound sleep crying, saying, "All that's left for me is suffering and death." Like, what do you even say to that? It's not making light conversation. Our friends were amazing, but I would have given anything to have somebody with me who understood, really emotionally understood what I was dealing with. And now I had the opportunity to be that person for my mom. So the colonel had been sent home from the hospital under palliative care / hospice, and his diagnosis was, old age, years of alcoholism, and hydrocephalus caused by the World War II shrapnel that had been passing on his spinal canal for a couple of decades, 3 or 4 decades. So he had this functional dementia. And, when some people develop dementia, they forget what year it is or where they live or the names of their children. Not the colonel. He forgot. He was a jerk. Probably because he forgot where the alcohol was. And I walked in, he said, hey, soldier. Biggest compliment ever from a retired Army colonel. Hey, I like your haircut. It looks like mine, which is true. I do have an Army colonel's haircut, don't I? And we knew Colonel wouldn't make it to Christmas, so we put up a Christmas tree early, a huge tree, really wide, a real one, which in Florida is not cheap. And Colonel was too confused at that point, even to follow sitcoms. So he would ask my mom to turn off all the lights in the living room except for the tree, and he would just gaze appreciatively at the multicolored blinking lights. That's a hell of a tree, Nance, he'd say to my mom. That's a hell of a tree. And then after Colonel went to bed every night, my mom would sit, together in the living room and talk about his illness. And we brainstormed ways of making sure she'd have the help he needed and comparing notes of loving burlesque diva and a retired Army colonel. And Colonel died a few days, as we expected, before Christmas. And now that once Colonel was gone, there wasn't that much caregiving to do. There wasn't any caregiving to do. So we just sat by side on the same leather couch. And really, we didn't even hardly talk. Occasionally, my mom would just say, thanks for being here. When my mom introduced me to people at the funeral, she said, oh, Kelly is a widow too. She lost her wife this year. I was so shocked. And after that time together, neither one of us could figure out how to develop like an actual mother-daughter relationship. But we had a history of this shared experience, and then we had this shared pain. So I guess we kind of became friends. I mean, friends who don't talk about the time one friend ripped up the other friend's birth certificate. And last year, when it came time for my mom to go on hospice, she called and asked if I could be with her when she died. And when I went down, one of the nurses' aides in the hospice said, oh, you're the favorite, which is just hilarious because of the whole torn up birth certificate thing. And also because I'm the youngest. Like, I have an older sibling who still asks me if I need to go potty before we go on a Gall Carn ride. But somehow I was the one eligible for directing my mom's end of life care. And my mom died with me sitting in an ugly wicker chair next to her, holding her hand. I did all the pre-death stuff. So my siblings did the post-death stuff, and they took care of cleaning out her apartment at her assisted living. And she was not much of a pack rat. And also there was a bunch of us, so there wasn't much stuff from any given kid. But my sister sent me a manila envelope with a file folder in it. And it was one of those green hanging file folder. And there are things like Hartford, Wisconsin, where I'd grown up, newspaper clipping, where I'd won an anti-vandalism slogan contest. The slogan was, be a deer, don't pass the buck. Vandalism stops with you, which is a very rural Midwest kind of slogan. And the thinking of you coming out card. The file was labeled in my mom's tight, upright, very measured printing. And the label said Kelly's accomplishments. I don't think that my dollar store coming out card, that was really much of an accomplishment. But us coming together and finding a way to be together, that certainly was. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.